It's that time of the month. It's time to start thinking about our September TBR. So before we get into it, I want to tell you guys you can get links to all of the books, if available, from the description down below, which links to bookshop.org. Bookshop.org is a company that works with small local bookshops where you can purchase books from them, and they give a little kickback to some local bookstores in and around your area. So check out the books from there, or go to your local library and pick up some of these books. So these are going to be in no particular order, but the first one I want to talk to you about is Earthsea. The first book I'm going to be reading is the first book from the Earthsea collection. I think there's 5 or 6 books. The first one, which is Wizard of Earthsea. This book is a collection of the first 4 books. I think one of my old managers bought this for me because he knows I like reading books. So I'm going to be reading the first book from the Earthsea series, I guess is the best word to use there. And basically, I'm looking forward to it. It's like your favorite fantasy author's favorite fantasy book. So I'm going to pick that up, and I like when people use Earthsea to prove how bad J.K. Rowling is at reading. So I want to be able to do that too. And by reading, I mean writing. And I just want to be able to do that also by looking at Earthsea. So I'm looking forward to it. I've read the first couple pages already just to kind of get a feel of it. It is definitely a book of when it was written. These books were written over a very long period of time, so I will also be interested in seeing how the books evolve as I go through the series. But as it stands, September, I am only planning on reading the first book in the 6-book series. It's like 5 books plus one collection of short stories, but it's 6 books. So I'm looking forward to it. If you've read Earthsea, let me know in the comments down below what you think of it, and do you think I'm going to enjoy it? I did read Eragon recently, and the Eragon series, The Inheritance Cycle, I enjoyed it. I thought it was good. It wasn't amazing, but it was good. So let me think what you think. I will think about Earthsea. I said to think a lot there.
What do you think?
The next book is a book I've talked about a few times on this channel. It is Bloody Nasty People. It is one of the books I looked at on my Books About the British Far Right video, which did pretty well, which I quite like. And yeah, it was the only one I could find, again, that was affordable, apart from one of the books here, Europe's Fault Lines. So I'm going to read this. It's also not super long either, which is good, because me trying to get through a long non-fiction book is like trying to wade through a pool of treacle. It is difficult and a slog. So, but I am looking forward to reading it. It was a very popular book when it came out about 12 years ago, so it's not going to be super up to date, but it will be quite interesting to read. Owen Jones liked it, so take that as you will. I know people don't like him. I think he's okay. He has some good takes and he has some takes, but you know, he said it was authoritative and eloquent. I thought that was going to be a longer quote, I'm not going to lie. But yeah, Bloody Nasty People, that is going to be one of the other books I'm going to be reading, and I think I'll get through this quite fast for a non-fiction book. I think it's going to be one of those ones which isn't get you too bogged down in it, I think. Talking about long non-fiction books, I'm also going to be reading The Return of a King by William Dalrymple. William Dalrymple's a writer I've recently been getting into, and he has some really good books on India. He basically specializes on India, and particularly Mughal India. So I've read 2 of his books. I've read Anarchy, which is about the EIC and their rise in India, and I've read The Last of the Mughals, which is here, The Last Mughal. It's about the fall of the Mughal Empire and the fall of Delhi in 1857, basically after the mutiny, which is basically the pit when like Indian resistance to the British was like, and it hit a peak, and then it kind of went down, and then it peaked again. That's kind of, it was like the end of the Mughals and the Delhi center of India, and then it completely went over to the British, and then, you know, kind of the Raj grew and grew, and then the locals rebelled, but that's a different part of history to that book. But The Return of a King is actually more concentrating on Afghan history and the history of Afghanistan and the Afghan rulers that came to India and how they tried to, you know, settle things in Afghanistan. So book, not quite the same, but that's what William Dalrymple's books are about. They're really good. I know William Dalrymple, it sounds like a name which you wouldn't think of be writing really good and like balanced books on this topic, but he genuinely is. I want to make a video on William Dalrymple's book, so spoiler alert, that's going to come maybe in September. I kind of want to read more of his books. I've read 2. This is going to be the 3rd one. He's written quite a lot. I want to read at least 5 of his books before I make a video. So, you know, he has a shorter book which is called The City of Jinn, which is less about history but more about actually being in Delhi, I believe. So I might read that as well if I can fit that into September. That might be an October read, but we'll see. But that video on William Dalrymple is definitely coming. Probably going to be October, November time. But yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking I'm going to do with that one. I noticed that whole segment I barely spoke about the book I'm actually reading, but so just a reminder, this is the book I'm reading, The Return of a King, not the other ones because I've read those, but this is the one I'm actually reading. So it will be interesting, I think. And let me know if you've read any William Dalrymple books and if you are actually interested in getting a whole video on William Dalrymple, because I think he's fascinating. I also believe his son is doing some really good work as well in terms of history and like geopolitics. So I might be interested in listening and reading to some of his stuff. I know he's got a podcast, so I think it's a podcast, or he's got like a talk going on, so I might listen to that as well. And the 4th book I'm going to be reading is Darfur, A New History of a Long War. Again, a book that came up in last Wednesday's video, and I think this one might be the one that takes me beyond September to read, simply because all the other books I'm reading I already have a cursory knowledge, or it's one of them is a fiction book obviously, but the other non-fiction books I'm reading I have a cursory knowledge of, so I don't need to like go back and reread sections. I don't know if you do this, let me know in the comments down below if you do, but when I'm reading non-fiction I oftentimes go back and reread sections a few times, especially if it's a section where there's a lot of new information for me or it's something that I'm struggling to understand. And because self-admittedly, my knowledge of African history, both modern and historic, or ancient, I don't know what the right word is. I didn't go to university, I don't know the words. But my knowledge of African history is very spotty, so I will definitely be taking longer to read this one. Again, it's not the longest book, but I think it's going to have a lot of information I don't already know, or a lot of stuff that maybe I'm going to read a passage and be like, oh, that's interesting, maybe I'll go research it more in other resources. So I think that's why this one might take me beyond September to read. Although the last time I said that, I think it was the Malcolm X biography where I said it was going to take me more than a month to read, and I read it in like a week. So maybe this will be the same impact where I'll read that actually quite fast, but I don't know, maybe. That's the 4th book I'm going to be reading. So as you may have noticed, that's 3 non-fiction books to 1 fiction book. I get it, like, non-fiction isn't super sexy when it comes to reading, but we're approaching winter, and winter is usually when I read all of my fiction books. I don't know, it's that cozy time. I want to be a little bit more cozy when I'm reading fiction. I like reading non-fiction during the summer and the spring because maybe that counteracts how depressing non-fiction often is. So going forward, like October onwards, it'll probably be like a 2 and 2 split for fiction and non-fiction, but who knows? Anything can happen. But nonetheless, there will probably be more fiction later on in the year, like the last 3 or 4 months compared to as it's been the past, almost the whole of the year thus far. But let me know in the comments down below if you've read any of the books I'm going to be reading, and also what's on your TBR for September. Obviously, I make a lot of videos about a lot of books that I'm going to try and read. Sometimes they're swapped in and out, so, I have made videos where I'm like, I'm going to read this book next, and then you're not going to hear me talk about it for like 3 months. That's because I've swapped it in and out. But these TBR videos, whenever I make them, I usually stick to reading those books, which is quite good. So these kind of help hold me accountable. So if you want to be held accountable, hey, maybe comment below what books you're going to be reading in September, and then, you know, maybe towards the end of the month you can come back and be like, oh yeah, I read this book and this book, or I didn't read this one, but I read this instead. It'd be quite cool, you know, you can come back to the video as well and watch it again and refresh your memory. But those are the books I'm reading in September. Just a reminder, you can pick up all the books on bookshop.org down below. Bookshop.org works with the local independent bookstores to give them a little bit of kickback whenever you buy a book from them. Alternatively, pick up the book from your local library, because we love supporting libraries here. Thank you for watching, and I hope you read a great book today.